Sean Williams, thank you for joining the AI Outcomes podcast today. It's been hard to pin you down, but we got there in the end. And our paths crossed. We both worked for a rather large business process outsourcing company called Serco. I was running local government kind of sales and business development at that point. And we were both, part of the dynamic of that business was whatever happened, you had a huge RFP response on your hands. And some of them you won and some of them you didn't win, and you never wanted to come second because that was the worst thing of all because you'd spent all that money. But Sean, give us a little bit of your background, please, and then let's get into your amazing company, which I think is going to be of huge interest to everybody watching this episode.
Thank you. Well, my company helps people not come second in RFP competitions, but to come first. So look, I've had 3 careers. So in my first career, I actually started out as a researcher on a proposal team, and then got promoted to be a writer, and then a bid manager, and then a bid director, and then when I was at Serco, a corporate development director, and then a managing director at another FTSE 100 company, and then a group managing director. And then I decided I wanted to do something for myself. So I left the corporate world and started my second career. In my second career, I started a leadership and technology training business called Corndell. Grew that under my leadership. It was the fastest growing training business in Europe. Founded it in September 2016 and sold it in September 2020 to a German private equity firm for $60 million. Stayed with them for a year, then left in September 2021, retired for 3 weeks. And that led me to my third career, which was I was introduced to large language models by my mate Andy, who works at Google's DeepMind on the protein folding team. So he knows a little bit about artificial intelligence and its real world kind of transformative applications. And he said to me, look, Sean, you should look at these things called large language models. They're interesting. We've built one. We're not really sure what to do with it. And commercial applications are all a bit downstream for DeepMind. They're in the business of winning Nobel Prizes, right? So I took a look, and at the time, the people who were dealing with large language models were astrophysicists, they were mathematicians, because the nature of the kind of complex soup of linear algebra you need to be able to do to understand and build transformer models, and as what became known much later as hallucination, looked to them like a fatal flaw. But of course, for those of us who'd worked in sort of sales and marketing, actually, accuracy is incredibly important. But there's a difference between the accuracy of 99% accuracy of advertising copy and 100% accuracy that you need in a mathematical proof. Those are different kind of tasks. So I saw large language models. I could see an immediate application back to those big RFPs. Yeah. It was an area I understood backwards because I'd spent 20 years doing it. So I put a small team of people around me. Half my original team were data scientists, machine learning engineers, but the other half of my team were all proposal professionals, people who actually done the job and really understood the workflow, really understood what it took to win. Because that classic, do you really understand the problem you're trying to solve? A lot of people in proposals think the problem is how do you write proposals quicker? But anyone who's ever written a proposal in a competition knows it's not about writing the proposal quickly, it's about winning. Because coming second and coming last, as you say, coming second is almost worse than coming last, right?
It is. You learn that really quickly, that coming second was the worst place because you spend, and just give people an idea, I mean, bid costs for one of the outsourcing contracts that we would be bidding to win, and to give everyone an idea, the scale of the outsourcing contract was probably like 300 million, so 400 million pounds, so $400 million. Approximately for a 10-year outsourcing contract, so big old beast. And then the bid costs along the way could be north of $1 million, could be north of 1.5 million. And you had this giant team of people. There was always a kind of like competitive dialogue going on during this process with the customer, if we remember those days. And then everything had to end up in an RFP response. And it was so difficult to do, to coordinate a large team of people across a response, that even if you'd done a great job in your presentations, in your meetings with the customer, that document, if it wasn't written down correctly, what you were proposing, you could, at worst, you could get thrown out for being non-compliant, which a disaster, and that did happen. And then I guess second worst to that is you don't communicate the value proposition in a way that lands with the customer, and they can actually resonate, but also they can digest your value proposition. And that piece about helping the efficiency of that process, which I guess you guys do, but also helping the percentage win, we call it P win, of the bid increase is of obviously deep interest to me and probably everybody who's involved in bidding. So yeah, sure. Give us your view on how you develop, because it sounds like you were around that ChatGPT moment. So DeepMind reached out to you. ChatGPT had their moment of kaboom onto the planet of the civilians like me. How did you then take that and do something with it to help solve for those problem statements?
Yeah, well, Ben, I should say the conversation I had with Andy was 18 months before ChatGPT came out, and we launched our product 6 weeks before ChatGPT came out. So ChatGPT followed us, not the other way around. So we are not jumpers on an AI bandwagon. We foreshadowed the AI bandwagon. We saw the tech and we're working with the tech well in advance of kind of it coming into the general consciousness. So look, I mean, I think, and you know, so we just found things before anybody else found them. You know, I remember going to San Francisco in this would have been like February 2022, so this would be like 7 months before ChatGPT comes out, and sitting down with a bunch of OpenAI engineers, and we were talking about the input variable to the regression models, right? You know, kind of the prompt, as it would now be called. And I said, well, it's really interesting. You know, the programming language is English, and if you add an adverb or sort of change the way you talk to the model, it gives you really different responses. And actually, the performativeness is not coming out of fine tuning; it's coming out of what will now be called a prompt. And they go, yeah, sure, we've got a name for that now. We're calling it prompt engineering. I was like, oh, prompt engineering, that's a cool name. So I took that back to the UK, and we advertised and recruited the first prompt engineers in the UK. No one else was doing it. No one else had heard of it. Now, of course, you can go on LinkedIn and find some idiot talking about, got like the stuff everyone else was, kind of like foreshadowing this kind of like, sort of like 3.5 years ago. But, it's kind of, I often say we read as much Cicero as we read Turing. If you don't understand what the task is, if you don't understand what makes language good or bad, then you're not going to be able to create a tool that does the thing you want it to do. So let me give a real example of why this is an issue in kind of our world. The main general large language models, things like Claude or Gemini or ChatGPT, right? Kind of GPT-5. They are evaluated primarily on a set of benchmarks around factfulness, around logical reasoning, around verbal reasoning, around mathematical reasoning. And by the way, all of those things are super important to evaluate models on, generalist models. But I don't know how many bid writers you employed. I must have employed hundreds over the years. I never asked a single one of them a PhD level maths problem. I didn't ask a single one of them a verbal reasoning problem. Why not? Because that wasn't the skill set I was looking for. So you go then to, okay, well, what is the skill set you're looking for? What do you want the output to look like in terms of winning proposal text? And actually, the great thing about proposals is it's binary. There's science to it. You either win or you lose. So you can actually see winning proposals versus losing proposals, based, of course, on a massive amount of context, because what's a winning proposal for one customer with one set of scoring criteria would be a losing proposal in a different context. And we actually then came up with 100 proprietary benchmarks within AutoGenAI. We're looking for things like consistency, for meeting the scoring criteria, for win themes, for understanding customers. So we're actually looking for, some of them, of course, have crossover with more generalist benchmarks, but specialist benchmarks are around what does winning text look like? And we're then evaluating all of our linguistic engineering, all of the results of that against our benchmarks. And we know our benchmarks are good because our benchmarks correlate very highly with winning proposals. And of course, we've got a massive amount of data on what actually wins, and that data is continually updating. So, and again, the sort of things we're measuring for, of course, the way we do it has to be algorithmic, right? It has to, or deploy kind of sophisticated linguistic engineering through large language models. But the sorts of things we're talking about are the things the a priori bit, the bit where you come up with it, is what proposal writers understand. Did this meet the scoring criteria?
Yeah.
Did we put it? Asked for 3 case studies. Did we give 3 case studies? Right, kind of. There's, so actually, what we're doing is taking those insights of world-class proposal writers, algorithmically putting them together, adding on then a layer of massive data analysis over the top of all of it, and essentially then doing what the very best proposal writers would have done, but giving you a tool that allows you to do that faster, more effectively, because there's more data rather than kind of just using human intuition to it. And then critically, like, no one gets disqualified, right? We do from a competition if they're using our software, because we do all of that compliance for you, and we pull it out, and we do it using computers, and computers, when they're not just using large language models, don't make mistakes.
Yeah, that's really interesting, and you've obviously got a really deep understanding of this technology, Sean, which is fascinating. Just to pull it back to the process, then you mentioned the sort of nuts and bolts around a proposal is it has a scoring criteria and process that the customer tells you this is how we're going to score it, and then you have to then get the maximum score, basically. And the customer could always pull some levers kind of in the background, but your proposal has to get the maximum score. It's unacceptable for it not to. And that can be a really, really tough ask. And then, so proposal comes in to the business. Hopefully there's been some pre-work to shape the thinking of the customer. But anyway, proposal comes in, RFP request arrives. What does the bid team do with that? Then it contains all the questions, it contains all the scoring criteria. Do they then train up like drop that into a context window of some description on AutoGenAI and start a process of setting up to respond?
Yeah, look, I won't go into kind of too much depth, but preferably before that, you'd already have been using our capture tool. So our capture tool talks to tens of thousands of data sources around the world and is coming up with opportunities that then fit you. It will tell you what your competitors are going for. It will tell you the sort of win themes you might want to use from your past proposals and your body of knowledge, but it will also tell you from publicly available data sources, this is what your competitors are going to say. This is what we think your chance of winning is in the abstract against those competitors. So then you can automatically just pull that into our system. So you don't need to do it. You don't need to upload any documents because they're all just being pulled through automatically. We're then reading those documents using artificial intelligence, and we're starting to put together your summary for the leadership, for the go, no go decision. We're putting that together. We're giving you suggested areas you might want to focus on. We're probably pulling through from your data sets. Actually, these are the people you might want to be in the bid team. From there, then, we are splitting up that RFP into the ideal structured response. And so you can try doing this using even something like GPT-5. It's just hopeless. Take a complex RFP.
Oh, I can imagine. Yeah.
That in 4 minutes, you'll have a perfectly structured outline which verbatim meets all of the points in the proposal. You're then able to write a first draft of all of those sections, and that then is connecting into your SharePoint library or connecting into your body of past evidence. It's writing you that first draft. You're then able to assign reviewers and assign writers to that piece. So we can then mirror our customers' gate type process in terms of writing and reviewing. Because we're so specialist, we understand what it is that writers and reviewers are actually doing. So, in AutoGenAI, you click a button called Add Case Study, and it will read all of your previous documentation, find the most relevant case study or case studies for that, and return those to you as the writer. We've got our explain how function for how questions, because we know there's how will you manage stakeholders in this complex, environment? And you can just click the explain how button, and that will then start to read your documentation and indeed use some creative type artificial intelligence to give you a framework for how you do that. So we've just made it super easy to do all of the linguistic transformations that are human and stuff, simple stuff that our kind of like customers love. You've written 2,000 words and the word limit is 1,500 words, and you want to reduce the text, but without losing any semantic content or point scoring content. So that's kind of super important to us. Ideas, again, from reviews, we have what we call our gamma review. So like you have a red team review or black team, gamma review is using artificial intelligence to review. And that will then do things like sort of things I used to write all over bids, right? ATQ, answer the question. So you've got
Yeah.
all, and then one idea, one sentence. So one of the things we have benchmarks for, one of the things which is unique about proposal text, or not unique, but especially about proposal text, is it's incredibly propositionally dense. So if you're reading like a popular science book trying to explain relativity to you in layman's terms, right? They're actually, the ideas are going to be spread out over a lot of sentences, a lot of paragraphs, because you want to try and repeat the idea. You want to say it a lot of times. You want to really try to talk about it. Because the limiting factor in proposals is often word count, character count, or page count, actually, they're incredibly propositionally dense. You tend to have one idea in every sentence, right? Kind of, or preferably two. Like, you don't want to have one thing you're saying and spread it out to 2,000.
No.
You want to
No.
have 2,000 things you're saying. We call that propositional density. You can measure for it, you can look at it, and you can start to then
That's
say
really interesting.
text is really waffly or it doesn't say enough. And then of course you can then the propositional density needs to then be made up critically of, does it meet the scoring criteria? But then of course, are we now singing our win themes? We've got all of these notes from our salespeople. Have we actually used the insights that our salespeople, those conversations we were having with the customer, is any of it actually being reflected in the in the proposal? And then, right, so you'd use AI review for that. Of course, complete collaboration in the system. We'll then export into Word. And quite a lot of our customers, we're obviously from a kind of government bidding background, but 30% of the use case of our software is business to business, and business to business tends to be much more PowerPoint proposal based. But also all the things we used to know, like really fiddly forms when you just want to fill them in with the click of a button. So, and then right then through to the data analysis at the end, did we win the bid? Did we lose the bid? What are the lessons learned? And feeding all the way that data back into what opportunities should we be going for in the future? So really that's kind of the end-to-end process. And we did a massive piece of work basically with about 200 proposal writers across the world, understanding what the flash to bang of how do you find opportunities right through to what happens when you've won them, and then using artificial intelligence and also sometimes more primitive tech type and AI techniques to concertina that process wherever appropriate. But also, I think really critically for us as well, keeping the human in the loop where the human's the best person to do it, because this isn't just about automating everything, it's about winning. And sometimes automating is the right way to win better. Sometimes keeping the human in the loop is the right way to win better.
Yeah, and you need the human in the loop, don't you? I mean, the human in the loop, when I was managing these giant proposals, I used to say to our customer, "Can you please give us a word limit?
Yeah.
Just please, just make it as restrictive as you can," because the biggest problem was overly verbose waffle answers that the customer had to wade through on their side. And remember, they're probably getting 5 of these submissions, right? They can't find the answer. And so I say, give us a word limit. I say, all of my team, every owner of every work stream, bullet point out the answer to the question first, and then your waffle. So I don't, as the customer does not need to read more than your bullet points to know what your answer is. And then we got to the point where it was still a challenge. So I used to say, let's just all get in a room and write the press release. What's the press release? And now I hear AWS are doing that, by the way. Oh, hang on a minute. I was doing that over a decade ago. Just write the press release. What's it going to say? And that succinct, the ability to take a really complex thing and write it succinctly means you know your stuff and you've figured it out. If it's taking you 100 pages of verbose text, you don't understand what your value proposition is, and you probably don't really understand the solution. You're just copying and pasting. So how do you take all of those bids that won? And I suppose there's some really good stuff in your customers' bids that didn't win. There's probably some cool stuff in there that actually got high scores. How do you take all of the good stuff and then kind of keep back all of the dross, shall we use the technical term?
Yeah, look, let me say a few things. So there's, as we know, there's a lot of reasons why things might be good or might be dross, right? So you need to understand the context of whether it's good or dross. So for example, dross content, because it's 100,000 words and it should be 1,000 words, is actually something large language model technologies such as ours are incredibly good at, right? Kind of like they are
Yeah.
essentially grammar machines. They've been sort of trained over, everything that's ever been digitized. So I sometimes say everything that's ever been written, more accurately, everything that's ever been written, that is on the internet. So their ability to take 10,000 words and make them 1,000, kind of is remarkable. There's quite a lot of linguistic engineering you need to do to make it sure you're not losing content and semantic meaning. Organizations like ours have just cracked that problem. So if content's bad because it's written badly, or content's bad because it's waffly, we can fix that. We can fix that for you, no problem at all. Like a lot of the time, content's bad because it didn't answer the question.
Yes.
We can identify, and then what we can do is use our software to identify, here's the bits of the question you haven't answered, and then critically go to the next stage. And by the way, here's reading other proposals you've written and reading more public information about you. Here's where you might add to that. And also then creative AI, where you go, actually, here are some areas where you haven't got information, you haven't got previous experience, but this is what best practice looks like from our research of more kind of like general kind of pieces. And of course, we say this because we always say to people, put everything into your organization library, won bids, lost bids, because what's great, because, and I'll come back to that, I said before, what's great content in the context of one customer or one scoring criteria is bad in another context, and indeed vice versa. And this is the wonderful thing about modern artificial intelligence. I mean, when my friend Andy said, look at large language models, they can read and write, my first response was, of course they can't. Computers can't read or write, but they can do maths with Andy's field. Maths shows maths is relatively easy. Well, kind of like, let me tell you, I spent 20 years crafting beautiful sentences. A computer is never going to be able to do that. And actually, computers can read and write. They can't do it as well as we can. They don't have human level judgment. And in my opinion, will never have human level judgment. At least large language models won't, because they're just randomly picking words to follow other words based on this grammatical understanding. But they can do it legions of magnitude faster than us. So that ability to, a company which has already been mentioned kind of today, you're using our software globally. In fact, I think I can say, because we've got publicity rights for them, Serco. I remember when I was at Serco, you'd want a case study for something. You'd spend 5 days phoning up managers, and I think we've got someone in Australia who does that. You pick up the phone. Now, Serco's entire knowledge management at the click of a button, they find across all of their content. The level of efficiency that the technology brings is just remarkable.
And how, I am keeping an eye on time. I know we've got time pressures today, but so how does that part work then, Sean? So setting this up for the first time, and say I run a business and I'm thinking, I'd love to bring AutoGenAI in, but I'm really concerned that my data is all over the place. We don't have it all on a nice like internal website somewhere. The bids are all over the place. Some are in Word, some are in PowerPoint, some are like just forms. How do I go from this is going to be too difficult to AutoGenAI actually helping me with that process?
Everyone, let me say, everyone's data is all over the place. Like, there's always this view. An organization go, it's so bad here, it can't be this bad everywhere else. We work with a lot of companies. Like, I've not met a company that has well organized and well structured data across the whole kind of across the whole piece. So this is a great example of not letting perfect be the enemy of good, right? You just start. It is better, just start putting, so our system's completely secure, it's completely segregated. We've got defense level security on the platform, and indeed are used by defense companies in the US, in the UK, in Australia, so across the world. So just start putting information in, and sure, you might not have all of your information to start with. We had one big outsourcing customer, they had 42 separate SharePoint sites.
Wow.
So now we integrate SharePoint, so we can integrate all of those together. So, well, should we curate the information? This is the wonderful thing about artificial intelligence, right? Large language models. You don't need to curate the information. It's like Google. You don't need to have the web perfectly organized. You basically just have a brilliant search engine of it, so put as much content in as possible. It's not a one-off process. You can keep putting content in. Individuals can put content in. Teams can put contents in. Keep putting content in as you go along. We have most of our customers up and running within 48 hours. And of course, then they go, Sean, we clicked on find a case study and it didn't find this case study. Is that document in your library or in your SharePoint, connected to SharePoint? No, just add it. Right now it finds it, right? Kind of. So you've got this kind of natural evolutionary incremental improvement. Like you would I often think of it, artificial intelligence, as a very literal, in some ways hyper intelligent and in some ways hyper stupid intern. So they sort of come to you on day one. They don't know anything other than what you tell them. And they will take what you tell them very literally.
Yeah, literally. Yeah.
So part of what we are doing is, of course, making that intern the world's best proposal writer when they turn. They understand all of the general things about proposal writing when they turn up on day one.
Yeah, yeah. And you mentioned this before, and it was something that was going through my mind when I was reviewing your offering, that you can't get a generalized large language model to do this. It's a bit like getting a generalized large language model like GPT or Grok or whatever to try and help you with anything really specific, like training content, for example. It can't do it. I mean, happy days it can't do it. The human needs to do it. And so AutoGenAI for me represents this. Now we've geared and engineered this. Like you're saying, we interviewed all of these bid writers. We've engineered the AI. So you've got the power of a ChatGPT or the AI large language model, but we've engineered it into this specific task. And that's the difference. And so you can't just drag an RFP document into, well, you could drag an RFP document into ChatGPT 5 and it would give you the answer, but it's not going to be the winning answer.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And we've been calling this linguistic engineering for about 3 years. And about 6 months ago,
that's a great term.
Andre Karpathy called it context engineering. And
yeah, he did, didn't he? Yes.
Like it kind of took off. But it's interesting, but it's interesting how long it took, like the mathematicians and the astrophysicists, to start to understand language. Like they've started to read Wittgenstein. I read Wittgenstein 25 years ago, right? But they've started to, a bit like when Google invented OKRs, because they didn't believe in management theory and then just ended up reinventing management theory from like basic principles. Because once it became interesting to them, once it was a problem they wanted to solve, these are the smartest people in the world. They can go but they're not shortcutting enough of this, because they've just not, we all know the things that we know, right? And we don't know the things that we don't know. So a very, very obvious example of this would be the rules around what makes a good love letter are different to the rules about what makes a good scientific paper, are different to the rules about what makes a good proposal to run a contact center. Now, that might sound really, really obvious, but if you've created one linguistic engine, and the mistake is you think those problems are all the same. You think they're just a language problem. But actually, language problems, there's not one language problem. How do you do language well? Actually, how you do language well depends on what problem you're trying to solve, depends on the linguistic context. And that actually creates almost an infinite number of sub-problems. And if you are brilliant at writing love poetry, you're probably really bad at writing proposals, because the rules of the game are incredibly different. And if you've trained your engine, if you've built your model, if you're using your underlying large language model as being particularly trained just on love poetry, then it's going to be really bad at proposals. And so that kind of the context of what goes into the independent variable, right? The prompt kind of, but prompts becoming incredibly sophisticated nowadays. A lot of that then, again, something we came to really early, but now kind of like passe, like retrieval augmented generation, but it's much more interesting to think of it as kind of memory. I think of it as linguistic ingredients. When you're writing a proposal, like the problem, like people write crap 2,000 words. Like when you ask a subject matter expert, write me 2,000 words on this, and they write you 2,000 words that don't answer the question and are just complete piffle, right? And the problem is they're seeing the task as write 2,000 words, a bit like a lazy journalist, right? Just fill up 2,000 words before the deadline. Whereas winning prose, and we've already cashed out a little bit about what winning prose is, right? About meeting scoring criteria, about answering the question, about describing your unique solution, and all of those kind of pieces. So it's about understanding the problem. It's about understanding the rules of the game, and it's about then understanding what wins in those criteria. Now, in love poetry, like the rule of the winning criteria is you successfully serenade the target of your affections, right? In proposals, it's that you win, right? Kind of in more general poetry, it's much harder to kind of like, sort of do. But proposals are brilliant. You either win or lose. We've got really
yeah.
scientific, objective measure you can then start to use to do really
Yeah.
hard. So all of this might sound a bit wishy-washy, but you can start to do hard science on the wishy-washy stuff, and that's the really interesting stuff.
Yeah, and you're getting both sides of the business case, essentially, aren't you? Which is we help you win, which ultimately all businesses want to increase their percentage win, but you're also making it more efficient, so you're also reducing costs. So you've got both sides of that business case, which sounds really interesting. Look, I'm over time with you, Sean. So really interesting discussion today. You can articulate this whole problem statement in a wonderful way that resonates with me, sure resonates to a bunch of people listening or watching this. Where do people find you, and how can people like access AutoGenAI and start maybe getting a demo, having a play with it, and thinking about how could we help this transform our sales team?
Yeah, so autogenai.com, and there'll be a button on the website to click a demo. Or my email is Sean, SEAN, @autogenai.com, and I can put you in contact with the right people from my various teams around the world.
Yeah, perfect. Look, Sean, all the links will be in the show notes below this episode. So, Sean, I'll leave it there. We could get riff for days about this subject, couldn't we? Because all the pain, 3 o'clock in the morning, printing out bids and couriers turning out. I mean, what? What the hell was all that about? So anything that's transforming that dynamic, I'm all in on. So yeah, Sean, thanks for coming on today. It's been really informative. It's been great talking to you today. So thanks very much. You have a great rest of the day. All right, cheers, Sean. Bye bye.